Jira is an amazing tool, but every once in a while, especially when I'm trying to be agile and follow in the ways of the agile best practices, I sometimes wish that Jira was a little bit more visual. Well, in today's video, which is sponsored by my good friends over at Moser Consulting, we are going to be taking a look at their Clearpath application, and I'm going to show you how this app is going to take your agile game to the next level. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel, drop a like if you get value out of this video, and most importantly, don't forget to check out the links down below so that you can start your free 30-day trial to Clearpath. Let's jump into Jira and let's take a look at why Clearpath is the obvious option to take your agile skills to the next level. All right, so here we are in a backlog within a traditional Scrum board within the wonderful world of Jira. Now, if you're the Scrum Master and you're trying to make sense of your backlog, this could be a little bit overwhelming. We have a lot of items in one version, we have everything tied to an epic, but at the end of the day, we need to work on figuring out the order of operations. I like to call it PEMDAS, the parentheses, exponents, mathematics, division, addition, and subtraction. PEMDAS, something you probably learned in grade school, right? And PEMDAS is really, really important because in the world of Agile, specifically in the world of engineering, you just can't build things. You just can't start grabbing things from the ever-growing scope tree. You have to be very methodically, you have to be very prescriptive, almost put some blinders on and be very intentional in how and what work your team is going to execute on next. Because if you just let the chaos be chaos, your team doesn't get traction. They just spin their wheels in the sand and you really lose the ability to deliver high value products. But if we could visualize all of this work and put some structure and kind of control the chaos a little bit, well, then your team has a better chance of success. Now, looking at a backlog like this, again, Jira is designed to help you, right? If you can kind of figure it out, kudos, right? Thumbs up to you. But what if there was a better way that we can take this backlog and kind of make sense of our plan? Try to visualize the order of operations, that PEMDAS that I'm referring to, right? Well, let me walk you through Clearpath here. So I'm going to jump into Clearpath. And Clearpath, if you haven't seen my first video on it, where I basically walk you through all the functionalities, highly recommend you go check that one out first, linked down below. But in this video, we're going to focus on how can Clearpath help us be better Agilists? How can we visualize the concepts of Agile in a better way that Jira just doesn't deliver? So let's start off by bringing in some work. And so we're going to bring in a couple of releases, right? Because we might be working on a current release, but we might want to get ahead of a future release. And so this is everything that is in my backlog across all my different releases. And Clearpath is going to show me everything. Now, if an item is not in a release, it's not going to show up here based on this criteria. I highly recommend that if you're struggling, right, if you're an Agile team and you're just struggling to get traction, start figuring out your releases because you need a roadmap. You need a vision, a North Star to kind of guide you and your team, and putting things into releases or versions, which I hate that Atlassian makes this so confusing, but putting things into a release is going to really, really help you get organized. You're going to start bucketizing and prioritizing the items that get grouped together. And so now when we come into Clearpath, we're going to be able to see that. Now I'm looking at everything. Optionally, you can just look at a specific release and make sense of that release. And so just to keep things simple, let's just go with the single release. Now, when we're looking at this is basically showing us all the stories that are in this release. Now we can fine tune this a little bit. We can maybe narrow down a specific epic, but in this particular case, I want to know all the epics that we're working on and all those stories, right? And so we're seeing everything here. At this point, I have 13 stories. Some of these already have their dependencies. Some of these already have their order of operations mapped out. But as you can see, this very, very first row up here are basically the items that you should start with. And the great thing about this is that when you're looking at all your stories in the backlog view, it's not immediate, at least the observation as to determining where should I start. Obviously, this backlog can be ranked and you can start from the items at the top of the backlog. But if you haven't ranked your backlog or you haven't groomed it yet, it is kind of challenging to figure out, at least in a visual way, what should go first, because you might have stories at the bottom that you have to come down to and discuss, and then you don't really know the order of operations. You don't know if this critical story 3 has dependencies on another story that needs to happen first. It's hard to visualize. In Jira, we absolutely can open this up come over here and block it, but it's not very intuitive. When we come over to Clearpath, you're gonna see that we're gonna have this critical story number 3, and you're gonna be able to see the dependencies or the items that depend on it, right? And this is going to really, really help you as a Scrum Master or as a product owner come up with that plan, come up with that guidance as to, okay, here's what we need to do first, right? Based on these dependencies. And so I'm gonna go back to, again, just version 2.0, just to show the stories that I have here, right? And so now what you can gather from this view here when you're grooming your backlog is, okay, so here's the items that we could at least start with, right? Maybe you got to decompose these more. Maybe you have to add a couple more dependencies, and that's okay, right? Because as long as the stories exist, it's really easy for you to simply grab this story here and link it to this story over here. And then the tool is automatically going to add that dependency for you. So now you can see these two are dependent on each other, and you shouldn't start on this SSP-27 until SSP-29 is ready. And so now you can plan your sprint a little bit better. And in fact, we don't even need to go back to the backlog view to do this. We can simply, once we're done, right? Once we're like, okay, so this one's dependent on this one, we're gonna grab this story here, we're gonna make that one dependent on that, and then we're gonna grab this bug here, and we're gonna put this one dependent on this, right? So once you're having these conversations with your team and you're figuring out, okay, what's the order of operation? What needs to happen first? What happens next? What are you dependent on, right? Then you can start formulating what this plan looks like. And as you can see, this tool is dynamically creating these relationships for you. And it doesn't have to be very, I feel like it's a very parallel world here, right? A story could very much be dependent on a couple different things. And so you can do that relationship here, right? And we can map out to a couple different things, and we can get complicated because guess what? Engineering is complicated, right? It's not going to be simple. And so as you can see, we can start adding some complexity to how these items come together. We can even start creating these items where you're dependent on multiple items here. And so now things get a little bit more complex, right? Which is okay. It's okay if things are complex because we can at least visualize it. So now when we have to come up with our plans, when we have to figure out, okay, what should we work on first? Well, you want to work on all the items that don't have any dependencies, which are naturally Clearpath's going to put towards the top. And so you can start here, right? And now you can more tactically work your way down and be able to essentially figure out that plan for that sprint, right? And so now your team is going to be able to, okay, we know we got to start with these 3 because these 3 then unlock the next level. So very much in a Super Mario effect, you can't move on to the next level until the previous level is completed. And this is going to help you visualize this because when you're looking at this backlog again, you have no idea. Like, where do you start? Obviously, again, the backlog could be ranked, but if you're not ranking your backlog or you're not doing it very effectively, it is challenging for your team to understand what goes where. So from this view, we can also estimate our stories. So before we start our sprint planning, maybe we want to get these estimates. You can actually just click into them. This is going to pull up the actual UI. You can pull in your story points here. You could, alternate from this view as well, start moving things into your sprint. So I can just move them into sprint number 3. That's going to be a future sprint, right? And so I can just go item by item as me and my team are discussing our plan, our priorities. We can just click into these stories, come over to our story points, give it a value, and then we can also plan it into the sprint that we're going to want it in. And it's really, really easy, really, really trivial. And you don't have to change your context, right? You don't have to bounce between back and forth. But now you have the ability to essentially, again, understand that order of priority, which is really, really key. Now, that is your grooming, and that is a little bit of your sprint planning, right? Because from this view, we can go, okay, it doesn't make sense to maybe pull these in, right? Especially as you're doing your capacity planning, you can very much understand, okay, how many points are in each, right? And the beautiful thing is that this app, once you put the story points in, will show you like those critical paths so that you're seeing how many items are in your sprint and what's that longest path looking like. And so this tool is going to give you a couple of great guides or helpers to help you understand how much capacity you're bringing on, and so that you can only bring on the right amount. And so as you're doing this, right, as everything's getting story pointed out and as everything's getting planned into a sprint, you're able to make these determinations with facts and data by simply visualizing everything. And so that, again, helps us with our grooming, it helps us with our sprint planning. But how does Clearpath help us with our daily scrum? Well, this is really, really interesting as well, right? So when you're looking at an item, And let's just say that your team is completed with the story. We're gonna move this one to done, right? Let's just quickly move it to done here. Well, one of the cool things that you can do is you can actually change the status. So you can filter by these statuses. So I'm only showing my to do and in progress. Then your team can figure out, okay, so from the remaining work, what items are really good candidates for me to pick up as I'm going through the sprint. So obviously these 3 items would be really good candidates. And then it makes more sense for your team to not start working on critical story 3, knowing that critical story 2 and 1 need to be completed first, and critical story just by itself also needs to be completed before any of these other items can be worked. So your team can really start visualizing that correct order of what to work on next at the right time without having to guess. And so that's pretty much it for this video. If you did enjoy this video, make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you smash that subscribe button if you made it this far and you haven't subscribed. And most importantly, don't forget to check out the links down below so you can start your free 30-day trial to Clearpath for Jira. That's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.